What is going on, you guys? Welcome to the Sillzcast. I'm your host, Sillz. Today, I am joined by Brendan, Santa Cruz Medicinals, absolute legend in the health nutrition space. Brendan, thank you for coming on. I'm absolutely stoked for this conversation, and I think my viewers are going to learn a lot from this.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to chop it up with you. I think we're gonna, talk about some really cool stuff.
Yeah, man. So for those who don't know you, can you just give a quick background, who you are, what you do, what you're all about?
Absolutely, I'm Brendan. I run Santa Cruz Medicinals and Santa Cruz Paleo, and I got into the health and wellness space after getting my degree. Well, during getting my degree in medical anthropology at UC Santa Cruz, I started to think about health from an ancestral point of view, and that's sort of how I view health and wellness and what I talk about a lot now on, through all my content.
Yeah, man. So some you spoke about there, and something that I think has kind of shaped you as a creator and really given you a unique perspective on health and nutrition that not a lot of other people necessarily have, is that background in medical anthropology. So for those who don't know, what is medical anthropology, and how has that given you a unique perspective on health and nutrition?
Absolutely. So anthropology is just the study of people, the study of human beings, and medical anthropology gets into how did human beings live, how did they eat, how different things that affect people's health outcomes. So we would research more modern things like a water sewage system, and how it affected how a certain city developed or something like that, and how the people dealt with that. But what I got really interested in is sort of our hunter-gatherer lifestyle and what was going on pretty much, all of human history until about 14,000 years ago. How do different tribes live? And, what really got me fascinated in it is like, the first thing that got me really interested in health and wellness was skincare. Like I was trying to fix my skin. I knew, that diet has to do with skincare, but I was told by all these dermatologists and people like that, like, no, it doesn't have anything to do with it. That what's going on, is your face gets dirty and you need to wash your face. And I was like, this is weird. And then I remember we looked at these photos that this anthropologist took of all these traditional tribes. And they had the most flawless skin ever. They were jacked, like six packs, no access to a weight room whatsoever. I'm like, what's going on here? They are violating every rule of dermatology, of, all these different rules that any doctor would place. Like, don't eat meat every day, don't eat animal fat. On the dermatology side of things, like wash your face 2 times a day. Don't get dirt on your face. I'm like, why are these people, why do they look perfect? What's going on? This can't, something's going on here. So it got me interested in looking at the world through that kind of lens. And through there, you'd start to realize that for, 2.5 million years, we are related, you and I, which is fascinating to think about. And when I say ancestors, I don't mean your grandpa, your great-grandpa. I mean your deep ancestors. You are related to people that were on this earth millions of years ago. Homo erectus, Homo habilis. They weren't fully Homo sapiens like us, but they looked, and they could, if you taught them English, they could probably speak English. Like, they were human beings, basically. And the fascinating thing is that we lived in a certain way for millions of years, and we built this deep reward system within our brain that we stimulate today through stuff like exercise, through certain foods that we eat. But we've gotten so far separated from that, I think it's a huge issue with human health and just humanity in general. And so that's what I'm really trying to highlight a lot.
I think it's really important. I think it's fascinating because I think nowadays, obviously, modern clinical studies are important, and that gives us some insight into different factors of diet and health. But I think people forget that something that can be used as a study is analyzing how we've evolved as humans. I think evolution is quite literally the biggest study of all time. Of course, you can't isolate individual inputs and outputs, but you can look at what's happened over time, not just as a whole, but on a horizontal axis too. You can look at different groups, different societies, how America just in a short term has progressed versus Mediterranean countries versus some of the tribes that are still around that have more hunter-gatherer lifestyles. And I think it's just fascinating, and I think it's great that you're bringing attention to that as a way to analyze health and fitness.
Yeah, and for anybody that's listening to this that lifts weights, we all know the primal reward feeling after you get a really good workout in and you eat a steak, which I'm obviously always talking about on my TikTok and Instagram. But there is something to that. There's something deeper to that. And what I'm trying to explain to people is we have this primal reward system deep within the fabric of our brains, and we're getting away from it so often that it's causing a lot of these issues. And we live in the perfect time where we can blend modern science with our knowledge of ancestral health, because these hunter-gatherer tribes didn't struggle with depression, obesity, heart disease, cancer. So we need to learn what was going on there and view it as a tool. And of course, modern medicine is amazing. If I break my arm, I'm going to Stanford Hospital all day. If I have, some serious illness, I'm going to the hospital all day. We live in a beautiful world with that. But the issues that plague most people can actually be fixed. Liver King talks about his ancestral tenets. That's cool. It's one way of going about it, but it's like, the reality is we have this deeply encoded way that we're supposed to live as human beings in this reward system. And when you don't stimulate that reward system, you're not going to feel good.
Yeah, and the inputs that are going into that reward system nowadays, I think there's a lot of things that are artificially stimulating the reward system, and it's just becoming quite different from what it was. And I guess on that note, I think something that a lot of people want to hear about, because it's a controversial kind of trending, increasing in popularity topic nowadays, is seed oils. And so obviously I think we both would agree seed oils are a massive problem, but I think in a way they're a little bit misunderstood. And I think it's really important to have a good full understanding of why they're problematic, just in general, so that you're not in that lane where you're kind of in a state of fear. So I guess if you had to summarize, if you had to tell somebody, what's your elevator pitch on why seed oils are bad?
Totally. Yeah. So, before I even start, explaining why seed oils are bad, I'll also say is, I went to Chipotle 3 days ago. I had seed oils. Like it's, we live in a modern world. I'm on my phone too much. We're in front of some bright lights right now. Like everything's not going to be perfect. So, you don't have to, if anybody's listening to this, you don't feel bad if you're ingesting seed oils sometimes. But I think what we do a majority of the time is very important for our health. And right now, the main source of dietary fat in industrialized nations, let's take America, for example, is now seed oils. That is the main source of added fat. They did not exist up until 80 years ago. So that's just some of the background there. Most Americans are consuming tablespoons of soybean and canola oil every single day. And so what would be the issue with that is we have in our body an omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Omega-6 is not bad. It's not inflammatory. And omega-3 obviously is not bad. But we have a ratio of this. And there's many studies on this, anthropological data, that shows that our omega-3 to omega-6 ratio for most of humanity was probably 1-to-1. They even think that hunter-gatherers would have had a 4-to-1, 4 omega-3, 1 omega-6, 4-to-1 ratio. And we know that this is connected when you skew this ratio too much in the favor of omega-6, it leads to inflammation, obesity, hypertension, a bunch of issues. Most people now have a 1-to-40 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 because all of the food that they are consuming is cooked in industrial seed oils. And I think it's sort of funny how our government will typically say, hey, and doctors will typically say, you should try to eat, less heavily processed foods. But then seed oils are fine. Seed oils are extremely heavily processed. To make seed oils, you have to use heavy machinery, you have to use solvents, you have to use bleach. It's not good. And then the other thing that I talk about with seed oils is how they're packaged. If you were to actually get some cold-pressed canola oil and package it in like a glass, thing like this, that's one thing. But that is not how seed oils are consumed at all. They are consumed in a light plastic tub, which leaches BPA, causes a whole bunch of other issues. So my stance on seed oils isn't that there's some toxic thing that if you ingest them here and there, you're going to significantly reduce your health. But if that is your main source of fat, you're gambling. You're involved in basically this experiment by Procter & Gamble. And if you have any sense of human history, engaging in things that are, very new in the grand scheme of things, I'm talking, 80 years we've been ingesting seed oils, and probably only the last 30, 40 years we've been, ingesting them in this amount. I think that's a bad idea for health. So yeah, that's my elevator pitch on seed oils.
Yeah, I mean, you made a lot of great points there. And I think, so basically to wrap it up, so the omega-6 to omega-3 thing, that is evidence. If you show that data, there's PubMed studies, intricate, detailed studies about how high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is linked to chronic disease, leptin resistance, obesity. You really can't deny that. So that right there is, like the concrete evidence that you can show somebody to tell them, okay, this is bad. Once again, though, like you said, that is something that happens. If you were to have seed oils once a month, you're not going to end up with a high omega-6 ratio, omega-6 to omega-3 ratio just because of that. It's literally the fact that
Yep.
it has literally become a fat source, which is insane in and of itself. But then the other part is the processing. And a lot of people like to harp on the fact that it's processed with hexane, which, definitely is somewhat concerning. But, then there's research showing that only a fraction of, a negligible amount of hexane actually is in the final product and whatnot. So, I mean, regardless of whether or not that's true, I don't think it's necessarily a byproduct of the processing, but more so the idea of being processed. Because what you're creating here is an unnatural food, an unnatural concentration of omega-6 fatty acids, but also just something that you would never eat in nature. Like if you had a knife to your head.
Yeah. Yeah, you couldn't produce seed oil. And like I did a video showing how you can make extra virgin olive oil. Here's how simple it is. You can put a bunch of olives from an olive tree into a bucket, and with a ladle, you press down on the olives, and then you have olive oil. Beef fat is you butcher a cow, and you have the fat from the animal right there. So why seed oils have gotten so popular and people say that they're healthy is because in studies, they lower cholesterol. And a lot of these things being pushed in modern health by a lot of these dietitians is based on the premise that anything that lowers cholesterol is good. I disagree with that firmly. If you read a great book called The Great Cholesterol Myth by Dr. Bowden, who's a cardiologist, if you look at some of Carnivore MD's stuff on the topic, the goal of human health should not be to lower cholesterol as much as possible. It was one of the first things we could really measure in the blood, and so we started to try to connect it with all our might to heart disease, because it's just we were in a panic to figure out what was causing heart disease, and we've blamed it on cholesterol. And you can look up people with low cholesterol getting heart attacks. There's people with low cholesterol that get heart attacks. There's people with the perfect cholesterol, numbers that get heart attacks. Then there's people with high cholesterol that get heart attacks. To say that, something is healthy for you because it lowers cholesterol short term is just really misguided. And, I'm not worried about my cholesterol at all within the context of I have low C-reactive protein, low triglycerides, low HbA1c, and I'm fit. I'm cardiovascularly fit. I can run, I can train, I have good cardio. So, yeah, I think hopefully we develop a new context around cholesterol.
Yeah, I think that's definitely another point. And obviously, there's some degree, and I don't want to sound like like a conspiracy theorist. I don't really believe in all that, but obviously they're cheaper oils, and there is the deal with Procter and Gamble because they're essentially using something that used to be waste and converting it into something that they can use to improve their margins and please the customer. Because at the end of the day, as a business, your goal is to turn a profit and to please your customer. It's a customer-centric business, so there's definitely that angle too.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that.
But at the end of the day, you look at seed oils. I think it's crazy what you were saying, because if you look at an ear of corn, it has 1 gram of fat. And corn oil, which is one of the higher omega-6 seed oils, because they are different. Some have less, some have more. Corn oil, if you go to a restaurant, they might use 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of that in your meal. And so you're ingesting potentially 40 grams of corn fat in one sitting. That's the equivalent of 40 years of corn. I don't think our ancestors might not have consumed that in their entire life, and it's in one meal. That's crazy.
Yeah, another really common thing I get as somebody who got my degree in medical anthropology is people will say, "Well, our ancestors died earlier."
Yep.
They lived till this age. It's largely a myth. Infant mortality was very common. The first 6-7 years of your life was brutal, but it wasn't brutal because of the issues that plague us today. It was brutal because of if you broke your leg, you would die. You could die of an infection, stuff that modern medicine has solved. So we need to sort of look past that, because there's a lot of hunter-gatherer tribes who, once they make it past, 15 years old, they commonly would live into 70, 80 years old.
That's crazy.
And so we need to just kind of blend the two. Like, okay, what's the best for human health now? Blend the two, So, yeah.
I think in modern health discussions, there is this tendency for people to be very polarized, and an inability to kind of meet in the middle and say, hey, you have a good argument, and I'm gonna look at the facts, and I'm gonna take my argument, and I'm gonna synthesize with that. And but people like to kind of, it's almost like politics in a way.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Yeah, no, and that's like I started out, and I think a lot of people have seen my content where like I go really hard on cereal or something like that, and I say like, this is the worst way to start your day ever. Like, you're dumb if you consume this. And it's like, you have to do that to make a splash with content, because I want to get my overall message across, which is eating less heavily processed foods and more real food, working out, getting sun, stimulating that primal reward system of basic stuff. You go hit a hard workout and then you eat a steak after. Your body's going to love that. It's going to, your brain and body is going to love that. Getting deep sleep, basic stuff like this. That's the message that I want to get across to people. And, that doesn't mean you're a bad person if you eat cereal or if you eat junk food sometimes. But the reality is, the numbers show in our country, we have 1 out of 2 people is obese. We have 7 out of 10 Americans are overweight. 4 out of 10 Americans will get cancer at some point in their lifetime. We have 1 out of 10 Americans has diabetes. So it's insane. It's like, this isn't how people are interfacing with junk food. They're not really using it in moderation.
No.
Someone will always do at my video, like, hey, I'm a bodybuilder. I sometimes drink soda. It's like, for sure. Yeah, you're fine. All good. That's not what's happening in the population. And especially with young kids, it's like, it's not a good habit to ingrain in them. So, yeah.
Second most obese country in the world when you take out populational outliers. I mean, it really is a problem. Another thing I want to talk about, because this is a little bit, you can make arguments on both sides to an extent. So grass-fed versus grain-fed beef has been a very, another pretty trendy topic lately. So obviously we have studies, showing that grass-fed beef is more nutrient dense than grain-fed. But, then again, there's arguments, that people like to say it's not worth the money. So what is your opinion on why you should eat grass-fed beef over grain-fed beef?
Yeah, so if you can afford grass-fed beef, I think it's a better option. It's going to have more EPA and DHA, slightly, albeit it's not some crazy difference, to grain-fed beef. But, at the end of a traditional cow's life that's, not grass-fed, grass-finished, they're feeding it soy and corn. So that cow in its fat is going to have more omega-6 fatty acids, which I'm obviously trying to have that good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. So overall, I eat grain-fed beef sometimes, but overall I think grass-fed beef has more EPA and DHA, omega-3 fatty acids. I think the nutrient density is just better in grass-fed beef. But the real reason why I spend the extra money on it is the environment. I think grass-fed, grass-finished cows are amazing for our environment. It's what they're supposed to eat. Cow eats grass. It's very, very basic. But all that said, I've said plenty of times on my page, like, if you can't afford grass-fed beef, traditional beef is still extremely nutrient dense, really good source of protein, really good, for your health overall. So either way, but yeah, grass-fed beef does have some benefits.
Yeah, so there's a study showing the more nutrient density, but also another thing is just knowing that you're eating a healthy animal versus a sick animal. Because with grass-fed beef, you're eating what the animals are supposed to eat, whereas with grain-fed, you're eating an evolutionarily inconsistent diet. So when I tell my friends about the nutrient density and the scientific angle, sometimes that type of stuff will kind of go over their head. It has more vitamin E, more carotenoids, more antioxidants. So the analogy that I like to make is, if you're choosing the cow that you eat, would you rather be eating the Cristiano Ronaldo of cows or, a sick cow, some bum?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's an extreme exaggeration, but I think that's a really good way to look at it.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. And like, when you talk to, cattle ranchers, when you feed a cow grass its whole life, you're not going to have to use antibiotics. They're just going to have less issues. It's a species-appropriate diet. So That's why I try to choose grass-fed when possible. But, I mean, luckily we live in a place where there's a lot of pasture-raised options. And when anybody sees pasture-raised beef, it typically means that they were fed grass for about 80-90% of their life and then finished off with grain before slaughter. So that's, a decent option as well. And then your step down from that is just traditional grain-fed beef.
One other thing I wanted to ask about, because something that you had mentioned was the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. And so obviously that's important, as we discussed earlier. But one thing that I've noticed is that in general with red meat, the total amount of polyunsaturated fat is kind of negligible. So it leads me to think, is the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio really that important if we're only getting so much that, you have a piece of salmon and it's, completely canceled out?
Yeah, I mean, I try to add in a good amount of wild fish. This is where I differ from Paul Saladino, where he doesn't want wild fish. And I've done omega-3 to omega-6 lab tests. You can get that lab tested, and I find the risk reward of consuming wild fish. I love sardines, I love wild salmon, I love wild cod. You'll see those recipes in my cookbook, and why I eat those weekly is I do think getting a really omega-3 rich food and protein like fish is beneficial, even though our oceans are damaged. Yes, there's microplastics in our ocean. I think the benefit of getting that omega-3 rich fish is still beneficial, because beef isn't some crazy omega-3 rich protein.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely, sometimes I'll even eat grain-fed beef. Of course, if I'm at a cookout or something, it's not, it's another one of those things where if you eat grain-fed beef, you're not going to get sick, so to speak. Another thing that I think is probably the most overlooked ingredient in the entire realm of nutrition, and it varies kind of depending on the product, but artificial and natural flavorings. Mm-hmm. And I know it depends, because you really don't know what's in it. It's a very secretive industry. Basically, it could mean a lot of things. But essentially, with some companies, what they do is they use it to make the food have addictive properties. Mm-hmm. And then there's this entire multi-billion-dollar industry that sells these flavorings, which is extremely secretive. Companies like Givaudan, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's really interesting. And I think that that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think plays a major role in at least the obesity side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I think is, I know this very well, because we have in our paleo protein, we have natural flavors in the chocolate and the horchata. And so I know the natural flavor world very well because I've talked to these companies. First of all, the artificial flavors, I think those they should be avoided. But then we get into the natural flavor world, where some of these companies are essentially doing an artificial flavor and labeling it as a natural flavor. And you'll see this, hidden in plain sight when you talk to these natural flavoring companies. If any company has 300 options, it is a major red flag. The company that we source natural flavors from is the same company that RX Bar uses for natural flavors. They've done a lot of good content about some of the myths around natural flavors. But what we're both essentially saying is that there are real natural flavor companies. They usually have about 20 options. Because how are you going to get bubblegum as a natural flavor? It's not going to happen, So these companies that actually do natural flavors, they'll usually steam. You can think of it as, a little more complicated than this, but it's for a citrus flavor. They will take lemons and limes and basically steam distill them. And you could think, just with a basic science experiment you could do at home, what is that going to taste like? That steam drippings there, that citrus, if you boiled some, it's going to taste like lemon and lime. And they can actually essence that, and that is a natural flavor right there. They could do that with vanilla. They could do that with chocolate. Now, the options an actual natural flavor company has are not a ton. And I think that's why I'm very suspicious of when you see companies like LaCroix or any Waterloo sparkling water, and they have all these options for natural flavors. I get, major red flags. So I think it's definitely something to consider, especially when something is a natural flavor from something unnatural. It's how did this even happen? What occurred there?
Right.
So Yeah, it's definitely concerning, and like with our protein, we make sure to offer an option on Amazon that has no natural flavors whatsoever, no stevia even, just like nothing. It's just grass-fed, grass-finished beef isolate protein, because I recognize people's concerns about that.
And I think what it really comes down to, because it's an ingredient that kind of like seed oils, but maybe even more so, is kind of in every single product. It's going to be hard to find something without natural or artificial flavors. So the approach that I've taken there is kind of trusting the brand.
Yeah.
Because it really is all you can do. Because if you see natural flavors and it's from Santa Cruz Paleo, Santa Cruz Medicinals, I'll know that this is Brendan's product. He's probably using good practice here. Whereas if you're buying something with natural flavors from, I don't know, Frito-Lay,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and it limits like us a lot on like what flavors we can do. People with the protein, they're like, do a cookies and cream. Like I can't, like the horchata natural flavor is vanilla. So like they take vanilla, they steam distill it, and it's vanilla. It's so it's tough. Like we're like, okay, we might do a vanilla protein, but like we are limited, and I can absolutely see how these large companies that don't really have someone like looking over what they're doing, they just need to do things for pure profit. They're gonna go, fuck yeah, we'll do a cookies and cream. Yeah, why not? Yeah, throw some natural flavors from that weird company in there. Like, so yeah, it absolutely does depend on the company. But I mean, yeah, I'm a nerd about all this, and I use all the products I take, so I can never put some artificial flavors in my stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy, and then they can, at the end of the day, they can put natural flavors on it. So,
Yep.
Obviously, the majority of America, besides maybe 0.001%, is going to see that as a red flag. So there's no issue as a business there.
Yeah, it's dicey.
On that topic, a more well-known issue with a similar name, artificial sweeteners. So that's an interesting topic. It's controversial because there really isn't a ton of research saying, aspartame is bad, sucralose is bad. But, kind of like seed oils, or even more so in this case, they're brand new. They're experimental. So when there exists natural alternatives like stevia and monk fruit, that's where I stand. But what's your opinion on artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, so I think even with stevia and monk fruit, I like, and I have those in my protein powders. But there is stevia leaf extract, and then there's stevia concentrate. There's monk fruit, like an actual extract, and then there's concentrate. So I'm not a fan. In our products, we don't use stevia concentrate because I don't think our bodies know what to do with that concentrated sweetness. So like stevia is like a small plant. It grows, and you can literally chew on one of the leaves. It's pretty sweet. It's really cool. We're basically using just an extract from that stevia leaf. Now with aspartame and sucralose, I have my concerns with those. I choose to not eat them. You're totally right. There's not a lot of like long human trials showing that they're, going to kill you. But I would not be surprised if in 10 to 15 years there's really hard evidence that it negatively modulates your gut microbiome. And I think that's just something that we'll find. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I stand on artificial sweeteners. There's not really a reason to drink aspartame. People with their Diet Coke addictions, it's like, I know you can come at, those people can come at me and say, hey, like, I can't drink water. I find it gross. Well, that's fine, but that's not really a valid excuse to, drink 10 Diet Cokes per day. So, yeah, that's the artificial sweeteners thing is definitely fascinating, and I'm always eager to see more research done on them.
Yeah, it's crazy because you mentioned that. Why, essentially, why would you need to drink diet soda? What I think is similar to that is artificial colors, because it's, we're risking, ADHD in children just for our drinks to look cool, which I think is absurd.
It's crazy. And in so many pre-workout products and like the gym culture, like, the average like gym bro is consuming, on a normal day, they're consuming artificial sweeteners, artificial colors, preservatives, gums, anti-caking agents in their pre-workout, and artificial sweeteners in their drinks that they're drinking. Like whenever I go to 24-hour fitness and I look at what people are consuming, it's like, wow. Well, what I really think is, it's like, if people listening to this, it's like, if you want to wait for a long human double-blind study on everything, then you're going to be left behind in the dust, because that's how things evolve. Now Harvard is coming out and saying, hey, don't throw away your egg yolks. Cholesterol isn't as bad as we thought. Harvard's saying that. Whereas before they told you don't fucking eat egg yolks. So it's insane. Like, it's like you have to take some ownership yourself and make decisions for yourself without scouring through every PubMed research. Like, just from your heart and gut feeling, for any like gym bro watching this, do you think that eating artificial sweeteners and artificial colors, new anti-caking agents, things to make your pre-workout dissolve very quick in your water, do you think that's a good thing to do every day? And if you do, go ahead. If you're one of these people like there's no long-term human study showing it's bad, it's like, okay, like good luck. 4 out of 10 Americans will get cancer at some point in their lifetime. Why? What's going on? Is everything around us just okay? It's not. So that's why I live very differently. But I think, it's the long game. When I go surf on my 75th birthday and I'm shredded and loving life, maybe then people will be like, all right, yeah, hey, this dude was onto something.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because I feel like nowadays there's this standard that a lot of people have, especially on TikTok, where it's like, if there's no study that can completely back your point to a point of beyond a reasonable doubt, then it's just not valid. Yeah. Whereas I think there is an element of going with your gut and, taking the information that we do have and critically thinking and creating your own beliefs on the information based on that. Some things could be right, could be wrong, but like you said, erring on the side of caution in some place where you think that, there's a lot of evidence showing that you could be right there.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, man. I completely agree. Unfortunately, I got to run to the next thing. But yeah, I would love to do this again, man. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yeah, man. I have a ton of topics for you. I don't know if you want to come back on, I would love to have you because I have so much I want to pick your brain about. So
absolutely. And we should do a TikTok live too. I think that'd be fun.
Dude, I'd be down, dude.
Same style. Whenever I could even just, like get this thing boom right here and we could both go live one day. That'd be fun. But yeah, man, I think I love what you're doing. Anybody that's like, lately with my content, man, I've been trying to go a bit lighter, right? What I really want is people to just get healthy. So like I love your content because you're helping people get in the gym, and like anything that's positive and helping people get healthy, that's really what I'm a fan of. Of course, I do things a certain way, but I think a lot of people are missing the basics. So if I can inspire some people to do just the basics, lift weights, eat protein, get good sleep, I'll start there.
Yeah, man. And you're doing a great job of it. I think you've changed a lot of lives on that app.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's the goal.
Hey, man. All right. Well, thanks again for your time, and let's be in touch, man. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Later, brother.
Peace.